Hello, hello. Welcome to Talent Takeover Unfiltered, where today we are going to go over should the salary be included in the job posting, which I know is super controversial. So thank you, Taylor, for coming up with another controversial subject.
Absolutely. I'm here for that anytime. Anytime you want to talk controversy or unfiltered controversy, I should actually put that that's an added layer of I'm here for that shit. So yeah, I've been seeing this a lot and I know what my thoughts are on it. I put a post up on LinkedIn just to try to get, my network's thoughts on if it should be included in the job posting. So I've got some pros and cons. I know people could go either way. My thoughts again are yes, but love to hear your thoughts before we get into the pros and cons.
Yes. So what I want our listeners to know is you and I didn't even discuss this before. We try not to discuss our topics.
Yeah.
Because, you and I get hot and bothered. Like we were just talking about how much our gas bill was and we almost lost our shit. And then
Woosah. That shit is, I'm on fire about that right now. But yeah.
Oh my God.
Welcome to Talent Takeover
Unfiltered.
When it comes to working hard and keeping it real, we know our shit. Self-care, happiness, inner peace, and time. I'm Brianna Rooney, and this is Taylor Bradley.
Hey, y'all.
And we have thrived in chaos and turned it into an art form. So, Taylor, what are we doing here today?
We're here to give you a raw, under-the-hood view of all things recruiting and finally give credit where credit is due to a long underrated industry that's full of quote-unquote experts.
All right. Well, then let's take this show to the road.
Yes. If you have a large gas bill, let's get in on this. Let's sue them and really cash out. But no. So in engineering, we have kind of fought this both ways. So because I'm used to Bay Area tech, more rights over there. That's kind of where everything begins. The DEI stuff kind of began, I felt like. And so what they wanted to do is put pay transparency up for women and for minorities. And so I kind of went through that with them and through that interesting change. But on a side note, I also work with a lot of startups, and startups are, having to battle these giant FANG-like companies, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
they're okay, well, we're looking at these salaries, but what they're not putting on there is all the bells and whistles that total comp comes with. Mm-hmm. So I can see both ways. I could see they're wanting to be a range. I could see, but then also, as you know, that there's a lot of companies that will be well, an extra 5 to 15K isn't gonna, we're not gonna whine about that if we're getting the right person. So is putting a range also making people not apply? And on the other side of the coin, think about this. If you saw a range, aren't you naturally going to want the top range and be upset if you get the lower range?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think it's good that we have pros and cons, because I think it just, at the end of the day, the water cooler talk, and we're going to get into that, people are going to know what other people are making. So we could go, let's start with the pros. I think an obvious one that anybody that thinks about, okay, if I should have a salary on the job posting, is it saves time on both ends for the people the candidates interviewing, for the hiring manager. If they can't meet your financial needs, desires, it saves time on both sides. Even if it's not included in the job posting, that should be discussed early on, what somebody's expectations are. But I definitely think that that's kind of the obvious pro to that, is that it just saves time on both sides. You're not going to get people that are, if it's paying $200K, and they want 400, you just have completely wasted your time. Because like you said, there's sometimes the companies are willing to flex 10 to 15K to get the right person. But when it's just such a gross difference that there's no way possible they're going to be able to meet in the middle, then it's best to just know that and suss that out on the front end. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was going to say, so what we teach recruiters to do, especially in that first call, is to get really nitty gritty with salary. Here's an interesting caveat, is now in a lot of states, it is illegal to ask what their salary is, which is super frustrating because, and then on the other side, we would have companies, because we're external recruiters, we would have companies be okay, get their salary, because we were the loophole to that rule, to that law.
Well, what's interesting about that is that, yes, so it is illegal, but what we've always done is say, what are your salary expectations for this role? So that's really interesting that you say that, because I know for me, I've always, when someone asks me that question, historically, even when I was asked that question coming to work here, what are your salary expectations for this role? my salary expectations are typically aligned with what I'm currently making or slightly more. Like, I'm not somebody who's like, okay, I'm making, 100K and I need 400. So I like to think that people would give a pretty authentic answer to that. What are your salary expectations for this role? It should be closely aligned to what they're making. Now, I know some people will reach, but that's an interesting thought of how people approach that question. Do they approach it with, okay, well, here's my salary goal of where I'd ideally love to be at? Or when, interviewing for a new job, is it more closely aligned with the range that they're currently in?
Well, okay. I'm gonna battle this in a few different ways. So we've seen tons of candidates lie to us. Like, everyone thinks that they're leaving money on the table. And so I remember when we were talking a few months ago, we had caught a candidate, lying about salary, and I kind of giggled. I was like, oh my God, I think I couldn't even count on, my hands and toes how many candidates have lied about their salary. Think back to like back in the day when people had to actually show their W-2s.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. But yeah, so no, we've gotten caught. So we've had, we'll take their intake in the beginning and they'll say they're making X, 150. And then at the end, when it comes to offer time, all of a sudden now they got a raise and they need 175. Or they didn't even get a raise and now they said, no, I need 175 because I just talked to my buddy. Like, and now I've just decided that I'm underpaid. No, it's been like, as far as engineering goes, it's just like a shit show when it comes to salary. So I have tons of battle stories and frustrations when it comes to this topic.
Yeah. Well, I guess the factor that you pointed out is like, at what point in the process are they disclosing that? Like, if somebody's making 150 and to make a move, they'd want 175. Okay, that's fine. Be honest about that, that you want a pay increase in order to make the move. But I think regardless of the role that you're working on, if somebody tells you this is my comp expectation, and then they get through the process and they're like, oh, fuck yeah, they really like me, I'm going to see if I can jack that shit up. That's just an ethical issue and an integrity issue,
Well, it got so bad, and I'm wondering if you had to do this strategy. It's going to probably fire some people up, but I'm going to go for it. So it got so bad that if, like, let's say the person said, okay, if you get me 150, this is exactly my company. This is where I want to work. This is the job I want, like all those things, right? We got the yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
We get them 150, and they're like, I need to think about it. Do you think they can give me 5K more? You literally just asked for, like, I got you exactly what you asked for. So then it got so bad. It got on trend that people would ask for 5K more because this thing, no one wants to leave money on the table, that we actually would tell our company, I'm holding 5K back because they're going to ask for it. And like a lot of companies at first were very like, I don't know, like what if they find out, I'm like, trust me, or you can pay 5K more because they're going to ask me for 5K more. Like I could get it in writing for you that they're going to accept that 150, but they're going to ask me for 155. They're just going to. And if you say no, then they're going to go take this offer somewhere else and go get a counter. It's like, it was a mess. So yeah, we just got in the habit of offering 5K less because they would always ask for 5K more, and it worked every single time. It was ridiculous.
So having like a 5K reserve almost. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so back to the pros. Another obvious one, I feel like. It takes out the question of inequality of fair pay if applicants know in advance what the position is. So, and then also from the employee side too, you don't have to wonder if you're being paid unfairly in comparison to the next new hire because the salary is posted. It does go back to that, what you mentioned. If it's a range, then and also they specify, the ones I've seen specify for states, this is the range. For a specific state, this is the range. So, if it's,
I like that.
I like that too. Because I just feel like it's transparent. I may not love what the outcome of that is. So an example of that would be, obviously, if it says the pay is, 300 to 400 for California, it's probably not going to be that for Texas, But I think that goes back to people just have to have, realistic expectations about the cost of living and all of that, which I have a beautiful broke to boss tip that kind of,
I can't wait to hear that, because that, again, a super controversial subject.
Yeah. And then going back to what we said earlier about trust, people want to work in a company they can trust, and obviously transparency helps with that goal,
Yes. So then let me ask you this question. When you're seeing ranges, because again, it's just becoming more and more that people are starting to like put that on there. And also, again, it's becoming lost places. So that would mean then they would have to make sure their current comp with their current team is up to par, because what's naturally going to happen is they're going to see that and freak out.
I mean, you would think that's what they do, and you would hope that that's what they're doing, but it'd be really interesting to see if there's a trend as far as like what size companies are posting the salaries versus like Like, is it startups that maybe don't have a huge engineering team that are posting the salaries versus, maybe like the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 that aren't posting that? Because there would be no way, and yes, there's a way, of course, but I think about no company in corporate America I've ever worked for, because somebody is the squeaky wheel. They're just going to go and they're going to increase everybody's salary. It's just not going to happen, you know? So, and that, getting into, we have some cons with that too, that we'll really get into that and the water cooler talk and all of that. But my just little note on the pros and tip for everybody is you should never get to the stage of an on-site interview or even a final interview where you don't know the comp. I think that is such a dated mentality that you can go all the way through an interview process and then like comp is discussed in the final interview. And I'm talking like my early recruiting days. And so there shouldn't be anybody blindsided, in my opinion, but like, oh, I wasted the gas to drive there. I actually had to put makeup on. I had to get dressed. I had to put fucking pants on today, and then they're like, oh, well, you don't meet my salary requirements for coming in. Like, there's no way that it should get that far.
You're making my eyes water because, it was just 2 years ago. I always think of like the pre-COVID bullshit, because just everything has changed since then. And so, God, this used to happen all the time. I would always hear like, oh, comp doesn't really matter that much to me, so we'll talk about this at the end. No, we won't talk about this at the end. That's insane. But I'm telling you, there are some people that were like, would never give salary until it was time to give an offer. And then I even have people that would say, just tell them to make me market rate. What the fuck is market rate? What is market rate? For who? For what? Oh, for a Series B company. Oh, for a Series D company. Like, are you joking? Oh,
yeah, no, so it sounds like you're saying that there's candidates that don't want to discuss the comp.
No, yes, it's candidates. Yeah. Oh no, on the other side, it's totally candidates. That's like when you were saying that, I was thinking, oh, it's both ways. Like both sides have to come to the table and say, this is what it is. But here's the thing, like it wasn't just like maybe a year and a half ago, finally Visa, I was happy to see this, put out commercials saying like, why are we not talking about money? Why are we not talking about saving? Why are we not talking about what you're making? Like, why are we hiding this shit? It was because our parents said, it's rude to ask anyone what they're making. It's rude to ask what someone paid for it. No, we need to start knowing, like, why is it a secret? Like, why am I overpaying for something if my friend over here, got it for $5K or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I could go into that with like the whole Ticketmaster thing that happened. And then, when I was trying to buy those, the Ticketmaster jacking up the prices for the Taylor Swift concert tickets, and they were just like unobtainable. Oh my God, have you been living under a rock? It was like
I usually do.
Huge fucking deal. But, just recently, whenever I was trying to buy those little Wayne tickets, and I was like, God dang, I can't justify this. Even in his heyday, I didn't pay this. And then I just was curious this week, and I was like, let me go look and see what those tickets are. Each ticket is double what they would have been. Yeah, it's just crazy to me how people mark things up. And it's like, to your point of why would I pay more than my friend's paying or someone? But anyways, I'm a firm believer in transparency, and then it's a choice, like, okay, I choose to not buy those tickets. You choose to not accept that salary. There's always going to be people that are going to make more than you, is my belief. And I think that's because I've really, almost every single company I've worked at, I've had people that directly reported to me that made more than me. But I think it's like when you factor in what matters to you and the overall compensation package, that's what can outweigh the actual dollar amount for a salary for me. So
let's help the candidates out for a second. Do you think the people that made more were better at negotiating, or they just have a different role?
I think in my case, they just had a different role, and I think any candidate that has a job that directly drives revenue is going to be able to command a higher salary, in my opinion. So, when we think about recruiting and, the agency life, the commissions could be higher for somebody versus, if you have, and this is all hypothetical, if you have a manager who has just a flat base salary, and then you have recruiters on the team who are on commission, and then obviously there could be a pay discrepancy there in what the manager is making versus what the IC is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know. Was it the same for you in Renaissance recruiting that in Q4, engineering salaries went higher?
Mm-mm.
It didn't matter quarter to quarter for you?
Well, in Renaissance like you're talking tech. So in engineering, and our tech that we did was primarily IT level stuff. So, and I never heard about there being any, like their pay increased or anything like that in the fourth quarter.
No, interesting. All right, cool.
Yeah. And then cons. So obviously this can lead to you comparing your current salary to others, contributing to burnout, desire to change jobs, even a shift in loyalty to the company, And I think that's really interesting because that's another one of our cons. Like you may have a great, brilliant employee, you may be one, and you're being paid much less than you're worth, and you could end up leaving, taking some colleagues with you. The water cooler talk is really powerful. But I also think about from the perspective of if you've just got this great employee that's really happy, loves their job, is just rocking it out, and then they see that and they're really loyal to the company, love working for that company. And then they see that salary or they hear about somebody making more who this person, Joe Schmo could be a jackass. And it's like, but he gets paid that, and I feel like that's where could do the most damage to companies is those really loyal, dedicated employees, like your ride or die employees. And then what is that going to do for their perspective of working with that company now? You could have these really loyal employees that once they find this out, it's a wrap.
Yeah. I'm going down so many rabbit holes in my head right now because I have so many stories for this. Because I'm thinking counter offers, and I'm also thinking I hate it when it's my cousin. I'm gonna put my cousin on blast. He's an engineer, and this fucker, he would just tell me and he knew I was a recruiter. I was a tech recruiter. He would just tell me these stories, just laugh. But he would always reach out to recruiters whenever he felt like he needed a raise. Instead of his grabbing his balls and walking to his boss and asking for one, he would go and get an offer. He would go interview with no intentions of leaving, just so he could get an offer, give it to his company, and say, "If you want me to stay, I need this money."
Okay, so that's what not to do.
Oh.
Like, I don't care what kind of situation I was in as the employer. If somebody came and did that, especially if they did that periodically, like it's like once every 10 years.
Every year. And I was like,
wow.
You're such an asshole. But here's what's crazy is he does something that not a lot of people do. And it's like, Jesus, fucking.
Yeah, I just think that there are probably times, I know engineering is different than recruiting and the ebbs and flows that we experience, but there's probably times that could be really beneficial. But I feel like it just is, no matter what, somebody's going to hear about your approach to that. It may not be your direct manager that has a response to it. Maybe it's HR that processes the payroll change. They're gonna be like, this asshole. I mean, it's just, to me, it's like a stain on your name, for going and doing that.
On your name.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make him that t-shirt and send it to him.
Stain on your name. Just ask for the comp that you want. And then, take an offer letter. If you're not getting that comp, or if you're told no, it's like, okay, then you could go. I could see people and have had people go about it the approach that he's taken whenever they ask for a raise and they were told no. It's like, okay, well, if I leave and go somewhere else, here's what I can make, and then use that as leverage. But I still think, to your point, like, have some balls and just ask for a raise first. Yeah. And then, okay, so hiding salary info and using that information asymmetry to underpay employees is a great way to destroy that trust and turn your team players into toxic time bombs.
So naturally, I'm thinking of commission and thinking of, so I know this isn't exactly the same, but I guess I kind of did something like this, but we would be very transparent whenever like a deal was closed, and we had a commission range. Naturally, like the higher commission normally, like the longer you were there, because the longer you were there, like the more you just naturally produce. Like in a commission job, you're not there for years just kicking it.
Yeah.
So like we would always have the deals up there, and the reason why I did that was, one, so we could celebrate our highs and know our lows, but also it was a competition thing. It's like we all can calculate very easily how much this employee is making every single month.
Mm-hmm.
So our transparency was there, but at the same time, for some people, it was very difficult to see.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of like, and that could have been a toxic.
Well, I feel like you kind of know what you're signing up for in commission. I think it's more openly talked about, and that just goes back to like our differences in corporate versus agency. I think money is more openly discussed in an agency type environment than it is in corporate, and then unfortunately corporate, the mentality is kind of like there's always going to be somebody fresh off the street that comes in making more than somebody who's been there 10 years and is getting the annual 3% merit increase, which is bullshit, but it's a known thing.
Yes. I was just talking about that lately. So, Lincoln works on a boat, and or a mega yacht, excuse me, and they get like this just crazy bumps. And he was like, Yeah, so this next year, every year I get 1 month more pay. And I was like, I'm like, what do you mean? He was like, well, this year I get 3 months pay. I was like, I had to like keep asking him because I like wasn't understanding because we have this 3% thing. He's like, no, I got a full month for free. Like I don't work. Like so literally like instead of like 12 months pay, I now have 15 months pay for. I was like, what? Every year you get one more month? Why would you ever leave?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
insane. So whenever I tell him like our rules in the States and not to mention our like, shitty vacation stuff, like he's like, what? What? You guys suck.
He's dying to live here. There's he sure.
That's what I said. I'm like, let's get out.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. And well, I mean, that's a whole like I'm sure people would be interested in that. And that's a whole set of different laws and rules. What is it called? The maritime? What is it called? Where they have their own
Yes, it is maritime. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that there's a whole you've told me a bit about some of them, and then Lincoln also told me about some, and then I just heard of them from some of the TV shows I watch, and I'm like, man, that's its own like they got their own set of rules. They do shit like their own way. And that's an example of that. It's a really cool, like, where do you ever hear of companies doing that?
Yeah. No, never.
Yeah. And then, okay, going back to the salary cons, this is another obvious one. It tells your existing employees what you think their jobs are actually worth, versus what you think they're worth if you're underpaying them.
Yeah.
So it's going to feel like a giant fuck you.
Yeah. This one's such a hard one because I've seen both sides. I've seen people who are not self-aware and think that they're a lot more valuable than they are. And then I've seen the other side where it's like people are obviously just taking advantage of them and it just like hurts your heart. It's like, God, move on, push your confidence. But it is really difficult to put your self-worth based off of what you do. And it is really hard. And then it's also like you might work your ass off and have dedication, but maybe the role you have isn't what moves the needle for companies. So it's like, it's hard to justify how much you get paid. I don't know. It's really difficult. I think of a couple of people in my circle of friends, like I think of my sister who I know just works her ass off and I'm like, you get paid what? And she works for a giant company, so it's, I don't know. That's such a hard one.
Well, think about sales roles in any organization. So you could have somebody who is like in a C-suite role that makes a base salary of X. I'm sure there's other bells and whistles and equity and maybe, other things that go with it whenever you're at that executive level. And I'm speaking about these corporations. They have probably a base salary. And then you've got people that are in sales going back to the commission that they, probably have a base salary as well, but they've also probably got a huge incentive tied to the sales performance of not only themselves, but their team. And so they could end up making more than a C-suite executive. I feel like there's just certain roles that it's common sense that it's to be expected that they're going to make more. And as I mentioned earlier, it's typically ones that drive revenue.
100%.
And another one. Oh, go ahead. So somebody that's purely money motivated, like this one, who's seeking a job, you could get an influx of those applicants who may not necessarily meet the desired skill set or experience, but have kind of like this fake it till they make it to secure the job.
Yep. And so, okay, this recently, actually, honestly, I think it was just in the last year and a half, I learned about the halo effect, with interviewing. And I was like, shit, I totally have that. I'm like one of those awful hiring managers. Yeah, so like this person can come in and just dazzle you, especially because I'm used to interviewing, commission. People, a talent. And so it's like, oh, great. Like they're saying exactly what you need to do. I mean, think about, our service via Thriversity. I mean, we literally train people how to nail interviews,
Yeah.
And so it's like on the other side, you do have to be careful of like if it's fake or not, and so that's why on the other side, everyone should use our hiring manager training.
Yeah.
On how to actually combat that and how to deal with those questions, because naturally you see all the services all over the place on how to pass interviews. I mean, there's a science to it, and it was meant to help people have confidence, but it also people can use it to just again fake it to the make it, and then come in and just sit back and not do their job.
Yeah,
like that is crazy, and that wastes so much money for companies, for teams, for morale. For holy moly, I feel like we're kind of going on another subject, but like pay just intertwines with so many things.
So many things. And then, you also could get an applicant who isn't passionate about your corporation, about your mission, about your values, and because they're just attracted to the pay, obviously. So we want to put the disclaimer out there that it's definitely normal for applicants or individuals to care about pay. But you also really want the employees that care about the company, the mission, the values. You want that component to it too. So like pay is important. But I think this dated mentality of like people shouldn't care about pay. Everybody has fucking bills to pay.
Yep.
Pay's important. Let's be out there. Let's discuss it. That's why I tend to be a fan of it. Just talk about it and see what's doable, because I think it's a huge time waster when everybody plays these games about pay, like hiding and trying to haggle. And I fucking hate haggling. I'm like, just say what you want and don't have like the 5K story that you told me. I was like, just say you want the 5K, but like say that from jump,
Yeah. Okay. So I have a very controversial question for you. So because you believe in transparency so much, do you believe that there should be a roster of a company or just a department and it shows their pay?
Oh, no, I don't think that it should be that level of detail. I just think if somebody is temporary or potentially going to leave a job to come to another one, they should know what they're getting into. That's where I said like the salary, even salary specific to state. I just think it helps set realistic expectations. So if I saw a job that had a salary that was, pretty high and it was for California, common sense would tell me that I shouldn't expect that same salary in Texas. That's the world we live in. I think people I know.
Common sense, not so common.
No, not so common, but it still is just one of those things that it's like, people have to have some realistic expectations that revenue driving roles will probably make more. Certain states for the same exact role will make more. I mean, there's just the cost of living is higher. There's just stuff like that people have to be realistic and factor in. And so that's why I tend to be a fan of be transparent, because I think you want those people that are realistic about where they want to be, not only with their compensation and their skill set and their level of experience and what they're bringing to the table to ask for said compensation, but what state they live in, the cost of there's so many things to factor in. And again, maybe I have a mentality because I've always had people that report to me that make more than me, at least one, but it's never bothered me because I've understood that there's a difference in my role and their role in the company, but that's a choice. I chose to take this role. They chose to be in that role. People are not victims of their choices. So
that could be your broke to boss tip. That I really enjoy.
No, I say that to my kids all the time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you're not a victim of your choices. Because I'm like, I don't like the victim mentality. I'm like, no.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so we're so running out of time.
We are.
I was like looking at my phone, like, oh no, we got a guest coming on.
We do. So my broke to boss tip goes back to something we already kind of touched on, but with all the resources that we have at our fingertips today in 2023, all employees should be researching and utilizing public websites, apps, to know what fair market pay is for their role. Like regardless if it's on a job posting or not, you should be doing your own research. And even if you're an existing employee, been with a company for years and years, you should still be doing your own research. So like your cousin, he could have just done his own research, and, there's so many, again, apps, websites that will provide you this information that say the cost or the average salary for this role in this specific state, in this county. I mean, it gets super specific. So I think doing your research and knowing what's a fair market pay for the role that you're in, regardless of if you're asking for a raise, if you're looking for a new job, there's so many resources we have. There's no excuse to not do your own research.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I mean, there's even like levels.fyi. I mean, but you also have to be take into account, again, what industry you're from. Like, don't just look at, oh, well, Google said I deserve this. And, here's this like small startup says, isn't giving me this. And then also think about your range, what you're bringing to the table, and also how well you interview. So we actually had to tell, I know we're running time shoot, but we had to tell engineers, like, look, this depends on how well you interview, because they were doing tech challenges. Mm-hmm. So like it was a very technical position. And if they couldn't pass certain things, and naturally they weren't at the level that they were at, because every company has different levels. So it's like its own thing, which is why I really do think that there has to be a larger range on job descriptions, but regardless, there should be a range.
1,000%. Agree. Put a pin in it.